What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel, giving a shout out to the rest of the crew. Shad, Kelvin, KB Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. For everyone who's tuning in, thank you for supporting Behind the Bench. Subscribe to that channel. Help make this show the best that it can be. And let's get to it, man. Let's talk some basketball, NBA, National Basketball Association. And I feel safe in saying that this league has reached a definite crossroads, is operating in a state of flux with no true direction, and it doesn't have to be this way. And that's what's unfortunate about what's going on with the league. And now you see all these prominent voices and figures, criticizing the league about this, about that. And you have all these, hands trying to stir the pot. And that's a lot of the problem. There's too many ideas being thrown out there as to what to do about the league, how to improve this, how to improve that, what they need to do with the All-Star game and all this jazz. All I know is we didn't have this problem decades and generations before. We didn't have this problem. And contrary to what is said about past players, particularly during the 80s and 90s, those years proved to be what was known as the golden era of the NBA. There's no doubt about it, man. And it's not a thing about, like I said, I do not compare eras. It makes no sense to compare eras. We don't do this in football. When you think about football, it's more about, to me, teams. You think about the Packers, that was the team in the 60s. The Steelers was the team in the 70s. The 49ers were the team in the 80s. The 90s, I would say for the most part, the Dallas Cowboys and then the Denver Broncos, won back-to-back championships in that decade. And then the New England Patriots, right, of the 2000s or whatnot. And when you think about, when you start talking about greatness, you mainly refer to positional ranks in NFL in terms of running back, quarterback, wide receiver, things of that nature. And even if you didn't see that player operate, during what is known as during their heyday, they're still held in high regard. Like, Dick Butkus. Remember when Dick Butkus passed last year? The entire football community celebrated that man because of what he meant to football. Jim Brown, same thing with the great Jim Brown. And many people still hold him as the standard of all running backs to this day. They do a wonderful job in the NFL. And baseball preserves its history in a way, man, where, it carries a mystique when they talk about them past greats. The Babe Ruths, the Mickey Mantles, the Lou Gehrig's, Joe DiMaggio, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Bob Gibson, Roberto Clemente, Yogi Berra. I mean, we can go on and on. Reggie Jackson, and we still enjoy those players that competed in the major leagues during the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and today. But basketball has totally went a direction that has disregarded the past. And it's deliberate. And one thing you can't do is try to disregard history and erase history and try to prove it to be insignificant. Because you'll lose your way. And that's what's happening to the NBA right now. So now you see all these cats, on these sports shows. Oh man, the NBA, man, it's hard to watch. It's boring and all this jazz. Well, that wasn't being said about the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And the reason why it has grown so stagnant, the main reason is because the bar has been lowered. Changes were made to inflate scoring. So what we have witnessed over the past decade, in the grand scheme of things, is the game not being tinkered, being manipulated. Whereas you did not see that take place during those previous decades, during those previous eras. And by manipulating the game, the bar has become lowered and competition has become devalued. Here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. In the past, whatever roster that you started the season with, that's pretty much the same roster that you finish with by season's end, whether you make the playoffs or not. Now, there may be a slight change mid-season during the trade deadline. No biggie. That may involve 2 players. But when you see major overhauls every year, well, what you're really doing is you're manipulating the landscape, right? You're really not being fair. Let me put it this way. You're no longer really being asked to compete and elevate and improve because you grow lax and you start depending on outside, immediate help from the outside to bring in another star player or all-star player to help take you to the next level. You see what I'm getting at? So the league has grown too lenient. It's too player driven in terms of this player empowerment. That has done major damage to the NBA, player empowerment. Because if you really study what player empowerment applies to or refers to, it has nothing to do with player empowerment. Nothing. Player empowerment is really about handful of superstar players manipulating the system to stack the deck. Player empowerment, there's no evidence, no empirical evidence that will suggest that this so-called movement benefits every single player in the league. Player empowerment has nothing to do with salary. Because the way the system is set up now, I mean, if you enter the league, especially as a lottery drafted player, and you prove to meet expectations based on where you was drafted at and exceeded, you're going to get a max extension when your rookie deal expires anyway, based on your production. So money really is not an issue, maybe as it once was. So it's not about money. It's really not about free agency. Free agency was established 30 years ago in the NBA. That's not the issue. Because if we go back and study the roots of free agency, it was really fought for those athletes who felt that they were not being paid their actual value to the team based on their level of performance. So therefore, free agency was used as a means to maximize your earnings, to where if your current team was not willing to pay you your worth, what you knew you deserved, you can go elsewhere. It was not based on trying to generate an unfair advantage. So through time, particularly in the NBA, free agency has been exploited exactly for that purpose. So player empowerment is not about earnings, because we've seen many superstars in the league take pay cuts to join forces, which is why years later, around 2016, they introduced the Supermax deal, which was designed to keep their franchise players, give them the incentive to remain with their team. We saw a superstar franchise player turn down what would have been the first ever Supermax contract. So it wasn't about earnings. It wasn't about free agency. Player empowerment is about manipulating the system to stack the deck. But when you go that route, what happens is it leads to all this shuffling of players, all these trades. And fans start losing sight as to who's on their roster. You don't have the same relationship with players that we did coming up during the 70s, 80s, 90s. Right? When free agency was established in the NBA. Right? So what I'm getting at is all this manipulation and nefarious activity is led to this malaise. It's a malaise. I don't want to say it's a decline. It's a malaise. See, things can turn around overnight, but you have to identify the root of the problem. And it's been staring us red in the face for over a decade. What do they say about the ratings pertaining to the NBA? It has steadily declined since the year 2012. Not during the 80s, not during the 90s when, they talk about the quote-unquote age of expansion during the 90s, although the league has been expanding since darn near its inception. Right? 60s, more teams were added. 70s, more teams were added, especially after the merger, the ABA-NBA merger. Teams were added in the beginning of the 80s, late 80s, and then the 90s. Okay. So what we're looking at is when they say 2012, well, that was during the beginning of what was ushered in at the summer of 2010, the super team era. You can attribute all these struggles that the NBA is experiencing now to the ushering in of that era. The reason why they had to bring forth this new CBA and implement stipulations that limited the draft picks that you can include in the trade, to where you can no longer include draft picks 5-7 years out. It's because we've seen how organizations have been darn near destabilized going that route. Can you imagine? There's about 4 or 5 franchises right now that have operated in win-now mode over the recent 4 to 5 years. They have given up draft pick after draft pick to try to facilitate this effort to win now, basically take a shortcut. Do you know how many draft picks those teams are giving up to where they will have nothing left in that aspect once their win now pursuit is run its course? Do you know what's going to happen to those teams? And what's scary is this is how you know you cannot exploit the system and continue to thrive. Okay, so when you get rid of all your draft picks, you can't draft in talent of your own. And that's the basic fundamental element of team building in professional sports. Team sports is through the draft. Then after that is primarily making a key trade and then free agency. In that order. When you start going backwards in reverse, free agency trades and draft picks, you're gonna fall off. You're gonna fall off. So, so those teams operating in that mode. Do you realize, man? Once their run is over, man, how difficult fans of those teams are gonna have supporting they squad, because for all practical purposes, it's not going to be nothing to support. And they will not be able to depend on free agency as the means to bring in a star player. No, it's not going to work, because most of the young stars of today have re-signed with their original team for the next 4 to 5 years. So even if they did request a trade somewhere down the line, well, the teams that gave up the draft picks years ago, they won't have any assets to help, try to trade for that said player. So, the super team era to me has devalued competition. People stopped tuning in like they once did, and explanations have been given as to why viewership has declined. They say, well, people, watch NBA now through streaming services or whatnot, streaming services. But the thing is, man, everybody don't have access to streaming. And it's easier just to cut your TV on and turn on to whatever station is televising that particular game that you want to watch. Streaming, it may take a while to set up, you know what I mean? And then sometimes the stream doesn't flow clear. It'll pause for a second, and it kind of has some glitches. When you turn the TV on and watch the game, man, it's there. It's there for you. So the super team era, you should never see a situation where 3 franchise level players should be joining forces to begin with. If you got to think about it, if you have to manipulate the system and clear out during at least 2/3 of your roster, and then trade away a bevy of draft picks to make that happen, that means more than likely it's not supposed to happen anyway. Because that window to win, first of all, you're generating a top-heavy team. You may get a jump on the competition for a year, but believe me, those teams that did it the right way, step by step, through diligent means, they're going to pass those win-now teams. And that's what we're seeing in the standings. Another thing that is hurting the NBA, they're not promoting the young stars. They may mention of them, but when they do, they only do so with the intent of proving today's basketball player is better than yesterday's basketball player. It's not done with a genuine motivation. So what happens is, when you constantly try to insinuate that yesterday's players were no good, well, the standard of what those players established generations before that made the NBA great, that created the slogans back then of NBA is fantastic, NBA why we love this game, well, that standard gets replaced with complacency. That complacency turns in the willingness not to really go out there and compete with a true superstar mentality. When the superstar mentality gets compromised one smidget, you've already opened up Pandora's box. And that's what happened when we saw 3 franchise players join forces. The superstar mentality was compromised. At the same time, young talent was devalued because a lot of young players were cast aside to form that said super team. I believe that was that Iman Shumpert? He made a comment saying that because of the super team era, superstars no longer felt they had to work on their game during the offseason. adding a go-to move, improving, let's say, free throw shooting, learning how to react to double teams, just nuances of the game. You see what I'm saying? Now, you may stay in shape, right? But that's different from truly improving your game, to where if you did, you feel more confident about your ability to lead a non-super team to a championship. And there's a greater sense of fulfillment, and that will draw a larger audience because those fans will have a greater appreciation for you doing it the right way. A la Nikola Jokic, a la Giannis Antetokounmpo, a la what Steph Curry did 2 years ago and lead Golden State back to the promised land. That's why so many people tune in and watch Michael Jordan during the 90s and during the run of the championship run of the Chicago Bulls, because they knew that Michael Jordan did not take one shortcut, despite what these talking heads. That's another thing too. See, when you devalue the game, when you lower the bar, well, when you start seeing problems surface because of that, then what happens is you start digging back in the past and you start misrepresenting the past. Then you start saying things like, oh man, shit, them Bulls teams was a super team back then. But the thing about it was, in real time, in the heat of battle, nobody referred to that Bulls team as a super squad, especially during the first three-peat. Now the second three-peat, it was more like, it became more like, as they say, with Jordan returning back, it was so much excitement about seeing Michael Jordan come back. Scottie Pippen was in his prime, absolute prime, and they bring on Dennis Rodman. So they would create like a slogan to generate excitement. You know, Superman, Batman, and Rodman. You see what I'm saying? But the difference was between Jordan and Pippen, they built their dynamic up over like a 6-7 year period. They went through the wars, man. They went through the wars. So when they dominated and won the 72 games in 1996, there was no sense of them taking a shortcut. See, that's the difference. You see? And even though the Bulls, made history that season, we didn't tear down the past great teams, man. We didn't do that. That's not how we did it, because the ball was always there. The ball was maintained. And then that complacency has carried over into the All-Star game. Because for all practical purposes, the super team is really, throughout the course of a season, what you're watching is like a little mini pseudo All-Star squad anyway. And see, when you shortcut the game, you compromise the very thing that makes pro sports great, or just makes sports great in general, and that's competition. What are people talking about right now? Oh man, how can we make them guys compete in the All-Star game? Well, you got to get to the root of the problem. Complacency. Trash in the past. Trash in the past, distorting the past. So what happens is, a lot of today's players develop a false sense of superiority that they are that much better than players of yesteryear. And when you really think about it, fundamentally, man, outside of the three-point shot, that's why they've been focusing so much on the three-point shot as their basis of arguing that the players are more advanced today. But all it is that through capitulance in a lot of ways, and how the game has been opened up. Not that it's soft. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say the league is soft. I'm not going to do that. But by opening the game up, it created a mindset where, well, I don't have to necessarily generate my offense, like by reacting to what the defense is doing per se. I can shoot the three because the percentages tells me that a three is worth more than a two. So even if I take 10 threes and only make 3 of them, that's 9 points. Whereas if I just score 2 points, that's only 6 points. That's how a lot of these players are thinking. and it's based off of what has been introduced in a lot of ways to professional team sports, is analytics. Analytics, to me, produces complacency. See, what I'm trying to say is, man, it's not about a generation being better than the next. It's about the mentality that has changed. That's really the difference. That's really the difference. Like, here go another example. Victor Wembanyama. You know, and I believe, man, he has a lot of talent. I believe that. You know, he rookie of the year last year. I think he was first team all NBA for a rookie. You know, you don't see that every day. You don't see that every day. But if he was playing in the 80s and 90s, he wouldn't be allowed to take the number of 3-point shot attempts that he's taking now. So by him playing his true position, he would be more advanced than he is right now at this early stage of his career. That's what a lot of older fans are trying to say. That's what the Charles Barkley were trying to say. You know, but I do think that a lot of young stars today, they're getting tired of the criticism from older players. So I would agree that the former players should, instead of being so critical, encourage today's stars. Like, say, okay, this is what I had to do to become great. They can do it like that. This is what I had to do to improve my game. And I think if they approach it in that way, I think the young player, the gap that's currently there, it will start to dissipate somewhat. There won't be as much of a generational divide as we're seeing right now. So it's just a lot of factors that's playing into this, man. But you know, in terms of the commissioner here, you know, Adam Silver, he's trying to address these issues through superficial and cosmetic means. He's trying to create cosmetic solutions, you know, but at the end of the day, the myriad of issues will still linger. Remember a couple years ago during the All-Star game when they scrapped the original concept of who, you know, just like in a game in general, the team with the most points at the end of the game wins the game, right? Well, they scrapped that and they created an idea saying, well, whichever team scores 25 points first in each quarter, they get like I think it was like $500,000 or something like that. I'm just throwing a number out there, and they can take that and donate to the charity of their choice. And for that first year under that new format, they played hard. Then after that, they became complacent again because you're not addressing the root of the problem. So what I'm saying is, man, at the end of the day, the NBA, and I'm not trying to input my own ideas into it. I like to refer to what history shows what made the league great. But behind the scenes, I do see where Adam Silver and the league office is trying to implement strategies to restrict superstars from joining forces. And when you go over that new CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, they're making it harder and they're penalizing teams for trying to put such a roster together. So that's a good step. I believe, based on history, they need to require that any player eligible to enter the NBA must complete at least 2 years of college. I believe that's the number one issue they need to focus on. It's not so much age limit, it's experience. Because if you focus on age, then they'll say, oh, they're being biased. If you focus on experience and what's best for the league, the player, as well as the collegiate level, and I think you could reach some sort of accord. because over the past, well, ever since they allowed high school players to enter the league, for every for every for every 4 high school players who entered the NBA during that period, maybe one player was able to come in right away. Because even if you look at when they started that rule where high school players could enter the league, Kevin Garnett, right, first ballot Hall of Famer, right, one of the greatest power forwards to ever do it. Well, when he entered the pros right out of high school, he averaged about 10 points a game. Whereas if he had went to school for 2 years, at least 2 years, I guarantee you, as a rookie, he gonna average darn near 20. That's the difference. That's the difference right there. So when a lot of cats go back and try to be revisionists and say like teams like the Lakers and Boston had super teams, they didn't have super teams. What it was, you had a situation where those teams, are just all the teams in the league, when they drafted a player, number one, they were not drafting high school players. There was no one and done. On average, to be eligible to enter the NBA or for them to consider drafting you, you had to complete at least 3 years of college. So therefore, you're more mature physically, and your mentality is more equipped to adapt to playing at the ultimate level of basketball. So instead of being a one and done player as a rookie averaging about 8 points a game, well, as a seasoned college veteran entering the pros as a junior or senior, you instead of averaging 8, you're probably going to average about 17. You see the difference? You could enter the NBA and make an immediate impact for the team that drafts you. That's what James Worthy did when he was drafted to the Lakers. That's what a player like, let's say, Len Bias would have done, or Larry Bird. He was ready. You see what I'm saying? Michael Jordan, we know his story. He did 3 years. Ralph Sampson did 4 years. Akeem Olajuwon, 3 years. Clyde Drexler, 3 years. Shaquille O'Neal, 3 years. You see what I'm saying? Larry Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, he went to JUCO. He went to junior college for like 2 years, then transferred to UNLV, and then I believe he did another 2 years. So basically, we're talking about 4 years. Boom, he was ready. Lonzo Moore, Larry Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, Rookie of the Year. Lonzo Mourning, 4 years of college. He and Shaq really could have been co-rookies of the year. Grant Hill, 4 years. Tim Duncan, 4 years. That's really the number one. If they instead of lowering the bar to appease people and say, no, this is the NBA. This is the high level basketball. That's what Adam Silver should be saying. Or whoever the active commissioner is. This is the bar. We're not going to lower the bar to appease and to capitulate and to satisfy. No, this is what you got to do. And you're going to be better off for it. The league's going to be better off for it. The fans going to be better off for it. Where fans will be getting frustrated saying, oh man, this guy, he ain't developing fast enough. No, it's because he entered the league too early. Now, I'm a Los Angeles Lakers fan, right? You look at a player like Lonzo Ball, point guard. His game is darn near carbon copy that of Jason Kidd. And I'm always support the young core for what happened to him. But even then, if Lonzo Ball had been encouraged to stay in school for 2 years rather than the 1 year, well, 2-1, he would have been encouraged to correct his jump shot for him before he entered the pro ranks. And instead of averaging the 10.5 points he did as a rookie, maybe with the 2 years, maybe he averaged around 14 because he's more developed. Brandon Ingram, that's my favorite player. He entered the league. He's about 180 pounds, 185 pounds. He only played 1 year of school. Whereas if he would have did 3 years, well, now we essentially talking about Grant Hill type player entered the league potentially averaging, see, his third year in the NBA, he averaged 18. So if he do 3 years, his rookie year, he coming in averaging 18. So that'll scrap out a whole lot of, because a lot of these superstars that wind up, forming super teams, I believe a lot of the reason that they did it was because they felt they had to wait too long for young players to develop. And that's why when it comes to, I'm not gonna say the Hurricane on this one. LeBron James, well, when he goes back to Cleveland in 2014, he looks at Andrew Wiggins and say, well, he only got 1 year of college. I don't have time to wait. So we're gonna trade him and bring in Kevin Love. Whereas if the system was set like it was when the standard was at its highest, Andrew Wiggins coming in, let's say as a junior rather than as a freshman, then a player like LeBron James as a veteran superstar would say, okay, well, he ready to come in and contribute right away. See, what I'm saying is the league is creating a lot of problems by lowering the bar to make it seem like today's player is better than yesterday's player. When in all actuality, it's not even about errors. So I would say, me personally, based on the history, I believe if they implemented that rule and required any player trying to be drafted into NBA, y'all have to complete at least 2 years. Really 3 years would be ideal, but 2 years, I guarantee you will start to see immediate results and an immediate improvement in terms of the quality of play. And I also believe the center position is starting to, I've been noticing a trend. I think another reason why you're seeing so many 3-shot attempts being taken in today's game, particularly this year where guys are shooting like 10 3-pointers and missing like 7 of them. I believe a major reason behind that is because they still don't understand how to run sets for their big man. As we see a lot of talented young centers entering the league, and you got this, you can see this disconnect. You can see it like, man, do I supposed to get the ball here? Or, he don't look like that he's in position to score, so I'm going to just shoot this 3. And then I believe another thing that's hindered the league is positionless basketball. Positionless basketball leads to a lot of undisciplined play. Position basketball, everybody know they roll on the court. And what you'll find out is that you don't need as much talent as you think you may need if everybody plays their position and everybody plays their role. So what we got right now is a lot of chaos and a lot of helter-skelter, particularly among the teams that are in win-now mode that's talking about trades every day. But I believe as the super team comes to an end, you'll start to see incremental improvements to the game. And if they require players to complete at least 2 years of college experience, even more so than the G League. The G League should be for those players who have left college and may need another phase of development before you could consider them ready for the pro ranks. That's what the G League really should be for. And I'm telling you, this league you'll see the improvements within, I guarantee you, within 2 years, you will see significant improvements. Because it'll take a year to get adjusted to that rule, but by that second year, you'll start to see the improvements. So really, you have to get back to basics. That's really what Adam Silver needs to be promoting instead of this in-season tournament, changing the All-Star game format that people are going to criticize. Sometimes, as they say, if it ain't broke, then don't go trying to fix it or don't go trying to change it to try to appease certain people. Because in the end, once it starts to crumble, the people that you're trying to appease, they're going to leave you behind anyway. And that's why the NBA, it carried a mystique. The NBA didn't change for people to tune in and watch. No, the people tune in because of what the NBA presented. as a sports league and honoring the history of the game. That's all that they need to do. So sorry for the long video, everybody. I get so passionate about things, man, that you can see what's troubling the league, man. And sometimes, man, it's not a generational thing, man. It's not saying one generation is better than the next. The Charles Barkley of the world, when he makes those criticisms, like I said, they do. I would say at this point they need to push back on, and stop criticizing what's happening with today's players so much, because you want to encourage the player, you don't want to discourage the players, because it's going to cause a great deal of resentment, and it's just going to be this constant tug of war going back and forth with nothing, no solutions being made. But like I say, you see these figureheads on these shows, man, and they come out here and they talk about what they see, but they not getting to the root of the problem. So they're not providing anything beneficial to the situation. It's just creating more resentment. And what happens is you start blaming, you start casting blame, you start pointing fingers, this and that. This person is the reason, that person is the reason, instead of getting back to basics. That's all. Stop trashing the past. Uphold the history. Not saying you got to worship the history or talk about the history every day, but when you do refer to it, at least respect it. Because without yesterday, you don't have today. And the history is so rich, man. I mean, that's how the reason I became a fan of the NBA, truth be told, looking back on it, is because of what I learned about the past greats while, gravitating to whoever was current at that time. It was a beautiful thing, man. It was a beautiful thing. So they need to get back to that, like I said, man. And also was heard in the NBA. This GOAT talk, man. This GOAT talk is suffocating the NBA. It's suffocating it. When Michael Jordan winning those championships, before he won his first championship, everybody knew, man, the eye test. Everybody knew that man was the best player in the world. Everybody knew it. You remember his Last Dance documentary? Magic Johnson said at the Michael Jordan rookie year he was the most talented player in the NBA. Magic Johnson said that Magic Johnson was Magic. Bird like, man, we ain't never seen nobody play like this. That was Larry Bird. 3-time league MVP, back to back to back. But even then, they said, no matter how great you are, you have to win a championship to be considered the best player in the game. Right? And that's why he was so driven. And I'm telling, I really want to share this with the fans, man. Whoever's tuning in, listening to this. When Michael Jordan won that first championship, and it was against my squad, and I felt the pain, dog. I felt that pain. But you respected it because you knew how hard he had to work to get there. So all this mumbo jumbo about expansion and, Scottie. And like I said, man, I'm a fan of Scottie Pippen, man. As Jordan say, we a tandem. And like he said in his Hall of Fame speech, he said, in all the videos, you don't just see me, you see Scottie Pippen and all the championships I won. So Pippen was a vital part to the Bulls' success. But Michael Jordan was always the driving force, baby. And when he won that championship, man, when he held that trophy crying with the team pastor, standing behind him, man. I'm telling you, Michael Jordan was celebrated by the entire United States. I'm telling you, man, because at that moment, basketball was elevated to a whole nother realm because of who he had, how hard he had to work. Do you realize, man, how hard it was for him to get through the Pistons, man? Pistons was a great team. The Detroit Pistons were a great team. I know they was physical. I know they knocked people out of they off their feet when they was really feeling themselves, dog. as an intimidation tactic, but in all actuality, the Pistons played some of the best defense we ever seen in this league. In principle. And they won back-to-back championships. But what they had to do to beat Michael Jordan, it's enough to make a grown man cry, man. They threw the kitchen sink at that dude, man. Chuck Daly, when he talked about his defensive strategy against Jordan, especially by the time they faced off in the third go-around in 1990, he say, it's not about one guy defending him. It's about all 10 guys defending him. That's what Chuck Daly said. It's not about one guy. It wasn't about just Joe Dumars. And Dumars was a hell of a defender. It's about all 10 of us trying to guard him. That's how much respect Michael Jordan had, man. I'm telling you. And that's why, you know, I'm thankful to have had the opportunity to watch the NBA then, because, you know, for what they saying about Jordan right now, man, they really should be allowed to talk the NBA. They shouldn't be allowed. And that's bringing the league down. Because when you try to disrespect a figure like that helped take the NBA to reach a global status, and you try to erase him, that's not going to work. The league will crash trying to do that. You can't do that. A man who has an unblemished record in championship play on any level, college, Olympics, FIBA, pro. Man, if you really think about it, and this just popped up in my head. Bill Russell won 11 NBA championships, right? Well, if you total all the championships that Michael Jordan won, he won 11 championships. If you total it all up, that just hit me just now. If you total it all up, he won 6 championships, 2 golds. Not to mention the Pan American Games. That was a very popular event during the Pan American Game. Then the FIBA, and then the college. We talking about 11 championships, dog. And he didn't lose one time. So that means his championships in the NBA, it had nothing to do with expansion. It had nothing to do with that. That it was because of who he was. And these sports shows, man, they doing a disservice. They're contributing to the demise of the NBA. They're contributing to it. So once we get all this static out the way, man, and get back to basics and good principles, dog, and like I say, and say to players, for your benefit, we want you to develop your game in college for at least 2 years so you can be more physically ready and have the mentality to understand that this is professional basketball. This ain't no third rate. This ain't no exhibition. I'm telling you, man, this league will be, oh my God, you have another golden era. It's right there. It's right there, man. It's right there. So I'm sorry, everybody, for doing this long video, man. But Adam Silver, man, you know, it was crazy is, man, he know that the league is in peril. He know that. But he trying to satisfy the wrong people, man. He has to do what's best for the league. He has to do what's best for the league. And once that standard is established, then people will fall in suit, believe me. Because, as they say, he would have laid down the law and said, this is it. This is what it's going to be. No questions asked. That's the attitude that a commissioner like that needs to have. And I'm telling you, man, this league will grow. It'll be awesome because there's too much young talent in the league for it not to be. So again, sorry for the long video, everybody. Leave your comments, post your comments. I just want to drop this nugget. Until next time, JB for BTB Behind the Bench.